of Inside Badger Hoops. Ira Bowman, Justice Rockhill with you, or JC. You guys probably know that by now. It was a pretty good week to be a Badger last week with the men's team getting 2 wins, and with the women's team, they slid a little bit, but there was some good stuff that we saw. But after those last 2 wins last week for Snow College at Utah State Eastern and at Central Wyoming, they are now 17-1 and 3-0 in conference and remain number 1 in the AP poll. And we're going to take, and the Badgers received 14 out of 16 of the number 1 first place votes. And we take a look at, as we take a look at the top 10 here, JC, Indian Hills is at 4, and there's quite a couple other notes that are important to look at in the top 25.
I mean, yeah, most definitely when you talk about Snow College and how they've been able to maintain their productivity throughout this entire season, it's been incredible to watch. You know, obviously being fans that we are and being heavily involved with them as well, we've seen them beat these ranked teams so much that it's really become sort of the norm, I want to say, in a way. We saw them beat Indian Hills, and to Indian Hills' credit, they did make it a close game, you know, but I think Snow College just had the edge in order to beat those teams. And then Salt Lake Community College, they've played them a few times as well.
Once so far.
Yes. Yeah, and they beat them. Again, it was a close game, but, you know, a win's a win. So Snow College, obviously, they're going to take that into their back pocket, especially now that they're in the same conference, now in conference play.
Yep.
So we're going to see them playing each other a lot more. So I think them playing these ranked teams so well and coming away with wins is great motivation for the rest of this year.
Yeah, and it looks, when you look at Snow College's schedule resume, it looks better when Snow has beaten those ranked teams, right? So when Snow beat Salt Lake at Salt Lake, it was number 1 Snow versus number 4 Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Salt Lake's now dropped down to 22, which is not so good for Snow College's resume. And along with it's not so great is Odessa, who was the first ranked team Snow beat, has fallen out of the top 25. Actually, that's not true. Harcum was the first team that Snow College beat that was ranked at the beginning of the year when Snow College opened the season here at the Horn Activity Center. I believe Harcum was 24th or 25th. Harcum's been out of the top 25 for a few weeks, but still receiving votes. And Odessa is outside of the top 25 now, but still receiving votes in the top 25. So it's important to look at those and when you look at Snow College's resume and at the teams that they've played.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think every team at one point in their season, they're going to have their run-ins, they're going to have their sort of step-downs off of the scale, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, they're definitely going to fall off a little bit, but the thing about coaching staffs, they always harp to their team that, look, we are a capable team to be in the top 25, and Snow College have obviously lived up to that. You know, I think Coach Andrew May and his staff has really addressed the fact that we got to defend where this ranking right now, and I think that's exactly what other teams across the nation is doing in terms of their coaches, talking to their players, letting them know, because they know what they're capable of. I think every team is capable of being in the top 25 if they really put their minds to it and really just lock in. And, you know, to Snow's credit, that's exactly what they've done. And regardless of where other teams stand, it is going to hurt them where those teams, whether they go up or go down in those rankings.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll take a look now at the two games from last week that the men's team played. One at Utah State Eastern, and it was a tough game that they had played. It was, once again, a slow start for the Badgers. They went down 9 with just over 10 and a half minutes left at 22-13, and then it was a little bit of a change from there after Snow went down early. What was it that Coach May did to really flip the switch on in the second part of that first half?
I think it was just really seeing what Utah State Eastern was really just showing them, honestly. I think that Utah State Eastern, they put their pedal to the metal, you know, in a sense. And then Coach Andrew May, he let his players know that they're not playing that good, obviously. And obviously it's an away game. Obviously you're going to be road fatigue and everything. You're playing on an unfamiliar court a little bit, but it is a conference game, so I don't think the Badgers were really unfamiliar with the court so much. But regardless, they came out flat-footed, like you say, and obviously Utah State Eastern took advantage of that. So credit goes to the coaching staff for letting the players know that you got to really lock in right now.
Yeah, right after that 10-minute mark when Snow College was down, Coach May put in a 2-3 zone defense after playing that first full 10 minutes in a man-to-man defense in which Snow was getting burned a little bit. That 2-3 zone really shook up what Utah State Eastern was doing offensively, and it allowed Snow College to come back. What kind of ironically, because all USU Eastern plays is zone defense. They play a lot of different variants of different zones, but I just thought it was funny that Snow switched to a zone, and that was what really got them back to taking a 37-32 lead at half.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm glad you brought up that zone defense, because zone defense is by far way different than a man defense, obviously, and it can work a lot differently against an offense, and we saw that because the communication between the Badgers was much more fluent, I think, and their ability to really get their hands in the passing lanes, take away any passes that Utah State Eastern would have had, and also being able to guard inside the paint and guard the perimeter. I mean, it just worked phenomenally.
It really did, and then Snow College ended the first half really well, retook the lead after being down 9, and then in the second half, Snow College started out on they got out to a 15-point lead with 6 minutes left. So throughout the first 14 minutes, Snow College really was in control, led that whole first 14 minutes of the second half, and then Snow College went on a scoring drought, and Utah State Eastern finished the game on a 14-4 scoring run, which ended with the final score being 77-75 in favor of the Badgers. So after being in control, Coach May's team squeaks out a win on the road.
Yeah, and when you look at that on paper, that comeback by Utah State Eastern, credit them. Obviously, the players, they put in as much as they could to try and come back, but it was just a little bit too deep of a hole to dig out of. But I think it's just a nasty, filthy habit that the Badgers have to get over. They have to finish strong. They have to never underestimate the opponent late in the game, regardless of what the score is. There's still a chance. It's not over till the final buzzer.
Yeah, and I talked about this with Gary during the Utah State Eastern game on the radio. Snow College was down 19 in the first half at Salt Lake. They weren't down much, if like 2 points in the Colorado game, but it was very competitive back and forth throughout the entire first half in the Colorado Northwestern game, with a slow start in the first half. And then a slow start in the Utah State Eastern game saw them down 9, although they were able to get the lead at halftime. That's 3 games in a row, all first 3 conference games, where Snow College has started out really slow. And like you mentioned, that's something they've got to change.
Yeah, it's a nasty, filthy habit. I think that's definitely something the coaches are going to address. Now that you're in conference play, this is the time where you really want to lock in, and you're the number 1 team in the nation. We've already talked about that. Obviously, that ranking is as high as it gets. You don't want your opponents to look on the film, see your weaknesses, and try to really, what's the word I'm looking for? Suppose really just lock in on those bad habits of the Badgers. Expose it, yes.
Yeah. And I talked about this with Gary during the radio broadcast as well. Of the Utah State Eastern game it was after the game, not on the radio. But Gary was saying that Snow College is not looking like the number 1 team in the country through these first 3 conference games. They still hold that number 1 ranking because Snow hasn't lost yet. But with the fact that you start looking at these scores, and the win at Salt Lake was because I believe Bettinger missed a buzzer beater 3, and then at the Utah State Eastern game, Ike Palmer missed a buzzer beater 3 just inside of half court. So that's very easily, both of those shots go in. Snow College could be 1 and 2 in conference play, and if they want to change that, they've got to play a lot better in that first half, which they did in the Central Wyoming game. We talked about it. We kind of glossed over it a little bit in last week's show when we previewed it. Snow College won 92-59. Isaac Garrett did not play in this game. He was out with an illness. But regardless, the Badgers got a good win, but it was still close at halftime, 45-37. So it's almost double digits, but still less of a lead than you could expect to see Snow College having a game against a team like Central Wyoming, when Snow College has absolutely bludgeoned them the first 2 times Snow has played them this year. Yeah,
and I think when I really look at that game from the box score perspective, you look at that, not all of the Badgers start. Mark Brown Jr., he didn't start. Isaac Finlayson, he didn't start. I think it was really just more of a game to really get the bench players rolling a little bit, really get them some experience in conference play, and just really make sure that they're up and ready for this week going forward. So I think it was a very smart decision from Andrew May to really have that and have his starters on the bench getting limited minutes, keep them, rested, and make sure, especially with this being a home game this week, both home games this week. I think it's really important to rest your starters just a little bit. Obviously, you don't want to rest them too much because they're going to go cold. So I think it was a really smart decision by the coaching staff to let the bench players really shine and let the typical starters, just kind of flow in and really just keep their feet warm.
Yeah, you mentioned Isaac Finlinson didn't start. He still, however, was the leading scorer in that game, finishing with 23 points. He went 7 for 10 from the field, 5 of 7 from the three-point line, which is by far his best three-point shooting game this year. This is something we saw from him a couple of times last year. Was really looking forward to him improving that three-point percentage. This year, however, it's kind of dropped and leveled out a little bit from what it was last year. Shot really well in this game. Also had went 4 for 4 from the free throw line, leading all scorers in that game in that win. However, our king of the court for this week is going to be Chance Trujillo because, man, he did have an outstanding game against Utah State Eastern on the road. It may have not been high scoring, but he played phenomenally well.
And I cannot emphasize this enough. He was the true spark of that game for the Badgers, I think, in terms of his overall play. He was the spark throughout the whole game in all of his minutes. As you said, not high scoring, 15 points. 4 from 8 from the field, 3 for 6 from 3. But it was the shot selection and the time that he took those shots that was really critical for the Badgers. So, yeah, no doubt this is an easy choice. It's Chance Trujillo.
I thought he played really well on the defensive end as well. He had a couple of times where he matched up against Hayden, who was the leading scorer for the USU Eastern Eagles. I believe he finished with 23, Hayden did. And whenever Chance was matched up against him in that second half in the zone defense, he did really, really well and gave up 5 inches. Hayden is 6'10", Chance is 6'5", but Chance is a strong-built, fully grown man.
Yeah, he's a powerhouse.
So, yeah,
he's a powerhouse.
He is a bigger wing. And I thought he played excellent defense around the perimeter and when he had to guard inside. And that really, really pushed his performance over the top for me in that game.
Yeah, no doubt.
Against Central Wyoming, Chance also had 16 points. That didn't lead the team, as I mentioned, but he went 6 for 10 from the field and 4 for 8 on three-pointers, so even better in the Central Wyoming game. That 15 points against Utah State Eastern for Chance Trujillo did lead the team. Mark Brunn Jr. and Isaac Finlinson were right behind him with 14. So balanced scoring in that game. Nobody scoring really a whole lot, but Chance was the standout player in that game, and that's why he's this week's king of the court.
Yep, no doubt. Obviously, a great performance against Central Wyoming, but that Utah State Eastern game easily stands out because of the height and the level of the game and the stakes in that game, conference game and everything. So, yeah, this is, again, just an easy choice.
I couldn't agree more. So we'll transition over to some final buzzer for the women's team from last week. Unlike the men, the women's team only played 1 game at Utah State Eastern. The Central Wyoming game for Snow College was not a conference game. If I didn't mention that already, I want to make sure that's clear.
Yes.
The women only played 1 game, and it was the conference game at Utah State Eastern. However, unfortunately, Snow College was not able to get the win. They fell 61-46. Just in general, JC, what was your biggest takeaway from this game?
I think my biggest takeaway from this game was just the inconsistency on either side of the court from the Badgers. They just were really flat-footed, I think. And I think the injury to Ayanna Bay definitely played a huge part. She's been just beyond stellar this year. It really hurt the production from not just the paint, but I think the production of the point as well. It looked like the point guards just really had a hard time relying on more perimeter passes and not so many passes on the inside.
Brooke Pennington and Malia Elliott's assist numbers both have dropped with Ayanna Bay out. Not by a whole lot, but just enough that it's really noticeable. Sydney Smith has played well in the starting role for Coach Zoo's team while Ayanna Bay has been out. Ayanna Bay went out, I believe, early in the Colorado Northwestern game and hasn't played since then. She also might have not played in the Salt Lake game, but I'm not 100% positive, so don't quote me on that. But I know that her presence was dearly, dearly missed in this Utah State Eastern game.
Yeah, no doubt, because when you take away Ayanna Bay, you look at Utah State Eastern's roster, They had a bit of a height and length advantage, no doubt, because Scriber, I believe she had only over 20 points. 23 points. Yep. So no doubt that presence of Ayana Bay having, the similar size and the length to block those shots or at least contest all those shots, which is what she's really, really good at. It was deeply missed. And again, as you said, Sydney Smith, she's played incredible. It's nothing against Sydney Smith. She's played a phenomenal ball, but I think it was just a little too much to handle for her.
Yeah, well, and something else that Ayana Bay does really well is rebound the basketball. Badgers got out-rebounded in this game. Snow College only finished with 28 rebounds to 38 rebounds for Utah State Eastern, so -10 in the rebounding differential. That was something that was very noticeable, and it's definitely something that needs to be changed moving forward for Coach Zhu's team. Moving on a little bit more into the game flow, Snow College went 18 for 54 from the field and 2 for 27 from three. It was not a great game offensively, and in the first half especially second half offensively was actually quite well. Snow College played even in terms of scoring the basketball with Utah State Eastern in both the third and fourth quarters. The first half, however, is where it really became an issue, because in the first quarter, Snow College scored 9 points, and in the second quarter, Snow College scored 5 points. You can't go a half only scoring 14 points and being down. I thought I had it down what it was, but I don't. They were down. I don't remember what it was, but I thought I had it written down, but I don't. But they were down way too much, over double digits. I believe it was like 17 or 19.
Somewhere around there.
Not quite 20, but above 15. And that's just a really big hole to climb out of. And if you start scoring evenly in the second half, that's not enough to climb out of a hole, because you have to outscore them. And that's scoring so little in the first half puts on so much pressure to you in the second half.
Right. And when you talk about that bit of fight that the Badgers had in the second half to open it up, I do completely agree with you right there. But I think it was just the credit goes to the Eagles on that part, because they were able to adapt to what the Badgers had done coming out of the locker room. So the Eagles, they saw the bit of fight that the Badgers had, and they adjusted everything. They made sure they watched their film, I'm sure, and everything, and they just realized that this is what they're going to run. We know it's going to work against it, and they just jumped to that immediately.
Yeah, and I got to correct something, because it was 5 points in the first quarter for Snow College and then 9 points in the second. I had that lopsided. Still equals to 14 points at the half, which is not nearly enough. But I will say defensively, for Coach Zhu's team, they played quite well. I mean, you hold Utah State Eastern to 61 points. Badgers lost 61-46. But you only hold them to 64 points, and that's not a really high number.
No.
Normally in a game that Snow College would lose by this margin, it would be like an 80 or 90-something to like 70-something. Not a 61-46 game. So that's a big bright spot looking at this game, is the defense actually played decently well. It was mostly 3 players for Utah State Eastern who did most of the damage offensively, but 61 points in conference play is a pretty good number for Coach Zhu's team defensively.
No doubt.
Especially with Ayana Bay being out.
Oh, yes, definitely. I completely agree with you. Obviously, when you play great defense, it does translate to your offense, but sadly not in this scenario. So as you said, I think defense was outstanding, the best it could possibly be without Ayana Bay right there. But I think you just have to get a little bit more in rhythm on offense, especially in conference play. So I think the defense is something that they definitely want to lean on, definitely not too much. You want to be consistent on offense. You want to score the ball, because one thing that we did see before conference play is the Badgers, they were really good at taking the ball away and getting in transition offense and scoring quick buckets.
One other bright spot from this game, as we already mentioned the defense, the second bright spot, I'll say, was Brooke Pennington scoring. She had a very good game in terms of her offensive scoring production. Brooke Pennington finished with 19 points, 8 of 14 from the field, which is a good percentage, 2 of 5 from 3, which is pretty good for her, 1 for 2 from the free throw line, 2 rebounds, 3 steals, and 0 turnovers. That's why she's this week's Badger Queen of the Court. She played well, And what did you take away from her performance, JC?
The biggest thing I take away from that performance by Pennington is easily the fact that she did it from almost everywhere on the court. You know, those 3 steals, obviously those are from the point, but I think her scoring consistency was just so dynamic, and it was from just about everywhere. The mid-range 2-point shots, the 3-point shots, you know, she was taking smart shots, but, you know, only 2 for 3, which was the Badgers' only 2 threes of the game.
Yep.
So it shows that she was very productive from anywhere on the court, and yeah, this is just another easy choice like Trujillo. No doubt the queen of the court.
Yeah, no doubt at all. The issue when it comes to Brooke Pennington having a game like this, well, there isn't an issue with her having a game like this in a big game against Utah State Eastern. The issue is that no one else on the team could score offensively, and that's really where the problems came in that first half. The second half, it was very well-balanced scoring, and Brooke Pennington had more points in the second half than the first half. I don't remember what the numbers were, but I know that it was more in the second than the first. It was 9 in the first and 10 in the second, actually, because I remember she had 9 at halftime. So that's, you know, just by math, it's 10 in the second half. But Snow has to have another Lady Badger step up in games like this when Brooke Pennington plays so well and their defense holds USUE to 61 points.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that the biggest player to step up, especially at the home games this week, it's going to be Sydney Smith. I think she has a good chance to play very well. You know, I think she was, and despite her playing great, you know, again she played great against Utah State Eastern, but I think she's pretty disappointed with the outcome, no doubt. So I think she's going to come back at home a little bit hungrier, and I think she's going to be my main candidate for Queen of the Court this next week.
Well, that'll be definitely something to watch out for all of you who watch that game. And Sydney Smith, being a freshman, is going to be more comfortable in her own gym in their conference home opener. So that's also something that factors into that as well.
Yep, definitely. And they are going against some pretty good teams, you know, like they're going against some dynamic offenses. I think she's really going to have to step up in the paint defense, definitely look to get a lot more rebounds, both on both ends, defensively and offensively. So I think it's going to be a fun game all around, especially if she gets that connection with the point guards. You know, Brooke Pennington and Ayanna Bay, they've had a strong connection all year.
Malia Elliott.
Yeah, Malia Elliott, obviously. Yep, and Hadley Richens as well. Like, you just want to be the best friend to your point guards if you're the post player, if you're the center. So you want to be friends with them, no doubt, have good, strong connections. So I definitely think Sydney Smith has worked on that progressively, not just throughout the year, but in obviously the last few weeks with Ayanna Bay being out.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you mentioned that Snow College women's team is going to be playing against another couple of good teams this week, and boy, isn't that the truth. North Idaho less so than Southern Idaho, but North Idaho comes in to Ephraim on Thursday. That game will be at 5 p.m. That's January 16th. North Idaho comes in at 9-8 overall, but the same conference record as the Snow College women's team with 1-2. What are you really looking forward to in this game, JC? Because it seems like this could be a very evenly matched ball game here at the Horn Activity Center.
I'm really just looking forward to how the rest of the players on the Badgers team, obviously we talked about Smith, we talked about Pennington, but I'm really looking forward how the rest of the Lady Badgers are going to go into this game. Suga Charaga, she had her struggles against Utah State Eastern. I believe it was 5 turnovers against her.
Yep,
so
the team.
Yep, I'm expecting her to come up big and really protect the ball, be safe with it, make safe passes and everything. I'm also expecting on the defensive end, Hawakarangi to have a much better game. She's been the defensive lockdown everywhere on the court, from perimeter to the paint. She can do it all on defense. I'm expecting her to have a much bigger presence in this game. So I'm expecting the rest of the Badgers to have a lot more productivity.
Yeah, so we'll do a little bit of a stat comparison team-wise for North Idaho and Snow College here just for a second. Points per game, Snow 72.1, North Idaho 68.5. Snow College is shooting better from the field, but just by slightly. 44.8 from the field for Snow, 42.9 for North Idaho. 3-point percentage is where it gets a little bit better, 34% for Snow, 30% for North Idaho, and 75% from the free throw line for North Idaho, and only 66% from the free throw line is Snow College. So only one in favor of North Idaho in terms of points per game and shooting splits.
Yeah, no doubt. And those numbers really aren't that far apart when you look at it, honestly.
No,
so it's definitely going to be an even game.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be a really even game. I personally think that it's just going to come down to what the defenses do. Like, are they going to contest shots as much as they can, or take the risk and really just force awkward shots? You know, like awkward shot placements and everything. Like maybe find out where the Badgers are typically taking their most productive shots, you know, and really just try to force them out of their rhythm, force them into unfamiliar territory.
Yeah. So you said for Snow, Sydney Smith is the player to watch out for Queen of the Court next week.
Yes.
To bounce back. Who is going to be important for Snow to really shut down and play great against North Idaho? Who's one of their players that you're really looking at?
In terms of Northern Idaho?
Yes, for Northern Idaho.
Yeah, well, the one player that I'm looking at is number 4, sophomore Keelani Rookstool. You know, she's been really good all year, double-digit points, 15.4 points per game off of 26 minutes per game, 46.6% from the field, 33.3 from 3, and 84% from the free throw line, which is really good.
Yep.
And 4.4 rebounds. She leads the team in minutes and total points as well. So I think she's definitely going to be a top threat. I can definitely see the Badgers putting a player like Hadley Richens on her from the point. I definitely think that's more of a possibility because of how quick and dynamic Richens can be, especially at home. And I think in terms of taking away the passing lanes, that's definitely going to be where Hawakarangi and Sugacharaga are definitely going to come in handy, because and force her into uncomfortable territory, like I mentioned with the Badgers, just really force her into awkward passes and really just make her try to flow the offense in and out of the paint, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. And then North Idaho, following that North Idaho women's game will be the North Idaho men's game. Snow College will be hosting a 11-7 overall North Idaho Cardinal, who are 1-2 in conference play so far. Snow College 3-0 in conference play. However, North Idaho's 2 losses were by very, very slim margins to ranked teams. They lost to Salt Lake, the Salt Lake game was not close, but the loss to CSI at CSI was only by 1, 75-74, and then a close win against Colorado Northwestern, 78-76. So 2 of those 3 games were close. One of them wasn't. The win was close, and a loss was close. That tells you how North Idaho can play. They might be a little up and down, but they come into this game with one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, and you really beat me to the punch in terms of their play overall, no doubt. Like, you beat me to the punch on that one. I was just going to say how they've really just been able to make sure these games are really close, and it's really just kind of a motivator, I think, for Northern Idaho going into this game against the #1 team in the nation. You know, like, their productivity against CSI was beyond good, obviously just a 1-point game. So I definitely think for North Idaho, they're just going to really try to capitalize off of the mistakes of the Badgers.
Yep, and then I mentioned that one of the best players in the country for North Idaho is number 0. It's still weird to say number 0, but number 0 guard Von Weems, who averages 33 minutes per game. And what is it about those? What does he do in those 33 minutes, JC, that makes him so good?
Well, I'm just going to open up with the biggest thing, the points. I mean, he is the #1 scoring in the nation. He averages
points per game.
Yeah, points per game. He is #1 in the nation, averages 29.5 points on the season, partner. 55% from field, 38.7% from 3, so I definitely think that's going to be the weak point that the Badgers are going to look at. But he's also 79.5% from the free throw line, but he also averages 9 rebounds a game. So I think there's a lot of things about his game that I really like from watching him. He's definitely going to be the most dynamic player that the Badgers are going to have to look at. And I think the biggest thing for the Badgers going into this game is just really lock on him, see his strengths, see his weaknesses, and really just do what I think the Lady Badgers are going to do, and that's try to neutralize those strengths.
Yep, I agree. I guarantee you Coach May already has a game plan that he's been practicing out with the team and will be for the next couple of days before Thursday. After that, a couple of days later, Saturday, Southern Idaho, College of Southern Idaho will come down to play a pair of games, one women, one men, as normal. So Southern Idaho women's team is ranked 13th in the country. So our Badgers will be hosting their first home game against a ranked team since they beat, I believe then at the time, number 10 Casper College during the opening games of the year. And that was a huge win for Snow to open up against a top 10 team and win. Can they do it against a top 13 team against Southern Idaho, who was playing very well and averaging 73 points a game?
Yeah, I think it's really just going to be the same thing because they do have their best player, and that is number 5 for Southern Idaho. That's number 5, the sophomore, Kennedy Gillette. You know, she's been playing really good, double-digit points, 4.9 rebounds, 1 assist per game. You know, so that tells me that she's really more of a perimeter threat. You know, I don't think she's really going to be the player that's leading Southern Idaho up on the front court too much. I don't think she's going to have the ball in her hands leading them up too much. I think she's going to be on the wing side of the person bringing the ball up. I think she's really going to be utilized as more of an agile weapon, sort of like a wide receiver going against a corner in football. I think she's definitely going to be the one running around the court. The baseline cuts, I definitely think that's going to be where she's mostly going to be utilized in this game.
That game is going to be at 1 p.m. on Saturday, January 18th. Southern Idaho comes in at 15-3 overall and 3-0 in conference play. They're on a 5-game winning streak. So that's going to be a huge game for Snow College women's. However, for the men, they also have a chance to get a ranked win this weekend against Southern Idaho. College of Southern Idaho men's team comes in at 16th in the country, 11-7 overall, 1-2 in conference play. They've lost 2 games to teams that Snow College has already beaten in Indian Hills and Western Arizona. And I got to correct myself. Southern Idaho is 3-0 in conference play, not 1-2.
Yeah. Yeah, so in terms of Southern Idaho's men's team, I think it's not going to be, I definitely think they're going to lean on their best players so much. You know, like Snow College, that's what they've done. I think in terms of their best player for Southern Idaho, that's no doubt number 12, the freshman forward, Marco Doyle. Obviously, 15.1 points per game, 58.1 from the field, 53% from the three-point range, and 74.5 from free throw. And that just tells me out the gate he's a dynamic shooter, and it's definitely going to be hard to try and lock him down. But the biggest thing I think in favor of the Badgers is their experience. They obviously have some very experienced sophomores, Mark Brown Jr., Isaac Finlinson, Isaac Garrett. So I definitely think they're going to try and utilize that experience against the freshmen who, you know, hasn't really had that much experience, but obviously he's been dynamic, so obviously I think he's going to be the top threat in this game. So I think the Badgers are just going to try and utilize their seasoned vets, I guess you could call them at this point, to really try and neutralize not just him, but the entire Southern Idaho offense.
And we, in preparation for this show, we looked at Marco Doyle's numbers, and when it was 53%, both of us were kind of like, that is oddly high. So we went and looked at his attempts. It's not like he's been shooting 2 a game and going 1 for 2 or going 2 for 3 in games. He has shot over 50, I believe, or just under 50 this year in the games that they've played, and has made 24, I believe. I don't have those numbers exact, but I know it was around there. So that's not super low volume, but it is not crazy high volume either. He is just an efficient shooter.
Yeah, no doubt. He is very efficient, and I think he's definitely not going to look for those wide open shots. I definitely think if he is going to play point guard, say he is the guy dribbling the ball up, I definitely think he's going to be looking for the driving lanes and try to get easy layups off of a very quick Badger defense. So I definitely think those shots are going to be contested, but I think when you look at those numbers, I think he's just going to be dynamic all around offensively. He's going to be looking for the wide open man as well, so I'm expecting his assist number to be relatively high in this game. So it's really just going to come down to what the Badgers bring out and try to neutralize them.
Marco Doyle averaging 1.4 assists per game and 6.8 rebounds. That will be a big matchup, him and Finlinson being 2 of the best, and Isaac Garrett as well, 2 of the best forwards in this conference, and Garrett being one of the best forwards in the country, if you ask me. So that will be a phenomenal matchup to watch against College of Southern Idaho. So those are all the games this week that we're going to talk about on today's show. Next week, there's only going to be 1 game, so we'll preview that game probably in a little bit more in-depth since it's only one game next week here on Inside Badger Hoops. And one thing I wanted to shout out before we get out of here, JC, Snow College cheerleading team right now is desperately looking for donations to be able to go to nationals. They've been raising funds throughout the past couple of weeks. I will put the link in the description of the YouTube channel, so please go donate if you can. They would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that will do it for us on today's episode of Inside Badger Hoops. Any closing comments, JC?
I actually do have a bit of a thing to say, if you don't mind, partner.
Go at it.
I believe all of us here at Snow College, we do give our condolences to the California fires in Los Angeles. We do wish you all the best, and we'd like to thank all the firefighters out there risking their lives. First and foremost, thank you very much. So to all those who have fallen victim to the Los Angeles fires, we give you our condolences here from Ephraim.
Couldn't agree more. That'll do it for us on Inside Badger Hoops. Hope you have a great night, evening, whatever it is.